Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of the County Seat. I'm Chad Booth. We are bringing you the show today from the Governor's Boardroom at the Utah State Capitol, and we're about midway through the legislative process for 2015. Now, politics has usually been described, or aptly been described, as sausage making. It's a messy, messy process, but at the end, you get something that's pretty tasty, and it looks good, and it has a little bit of something for everyone. Well, the thing about this whole process is that the laws that we make today are going to affect our future generations. So what happens when we turn over the reins to the kids of tomorrow and they take over the legislative process? Because they'll have to fix the mistakes that we've made in what we've done today. Well, there is a college program at USU that actually helps students get engaged in the legislative process. Here with that story is Terry Wood.
It's a lot more interesting than I thought. When you think government, you kind of think boring, old people, but it's way more fun than I thought it would be.
Boring old people? Well, that probably is how teenagers imagine the inner workings of American government, stodgy and uninteresting. But today, that impression is being challenged. High school students from 4-H clubs throughout Utah are at the Capitol for mock legislative day. It's an opportunity for these promising young leaders to spend the day learning how the legislative process works from the actual seat of an elected official in the House of Representatives.
It teaches them not only how we work in our processes, but it teaches them not to be intimidated by government and to understand that they can actually make a difference and make a change. And I hope what they see is going through the process here that they'll go back and be able to educate others, their parents.
4-H youth programs are offered through the Utah State University County Extension offices, with programs for kids of all ages. 4-H clubs are most often associated with agriculture and animal husbandry, but the scope of these programs today is actually far more diverse.
In 4-H we have three major emphases. One of them is science, another one is healthy living, and the third is leadership and civic engagement. And so all of our programs are really focused on these three areas. And usually in a leadership standpoint, the kids start at a club level and they become a club president or a club secretary or treasurer. And from there they typically advance into maybe a teen council. And from there they advance into a regional ambassador program and ultimately one day a state ambassador program. And so from a leadership standpoint, these kids are gaining leadership skills at all of these levels. And this is just one more opportunity for our kids to get experience in leadership and some education on civic engagement.
The mock legislature is a unique opportunity for students to experience the process of lawmaking from the House floor. The only other way to get there would be to run for and get elected to office. The teenagers from all over Utah divide up into various committee meetings to discuss and prepare bill presentations, which are sent to another group that prioritizes those bills. Eventually, they meet on the floor of the House to debate and vote on 15 bills from the previous legislative session.
I remember we had a bill on teen drivers that the year we ran it in the legislature, it failed because the concern of the legislature was the issue of causing problems with teens trying to drive and the inconvenience. But when the teens came in, they passed the bill that limited what they could do driving because they felt these were major issues to them. And it was interesting to see what we thought we needed to do for the teens versus what the teens actually thought was the right thing to do.
These kids get real life experience presenting bills, experiencing that debate on the floor, and the legislative process.
It's good to have everyone's voice heard and get their opinion out, and then you can form groups and stuff with people that agree and disagree, and I guess you can just duke it out and get it all over with. But that's politics.
Better pay attention because these high school juniors and seniors may one day become the new freshman class of the Utah State House, the Senate, or even beyond. For the county seat, I'm Terry Wood.
Thanks, Terry. We're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we will take our seats at the round table and talk about the sausage we are making this year at the legislature. We'll get to the meat of the matter when we come back.
Remember those good old days? The places you went with your family when you were young? Reinvest in those old memories by making new ones. Beaver County is the perfect place to start that new tradition. Enjoy your favorite pastimes with family and friends. Connect with the history and culture of Utah in a place that's looking to the future. Modern conveniences minus the hustle and bustle of other locales. Beaver County, your adventure starts here.
There are a couple great things about the Uinta Basin. One is it's still small, it's community.
That makes you feel like when you go somewhere, you know everybody.
Well, you know your neighbor, and your neighbor knows you, and you can trust each other. People look out for one another.
I grew up in the Uinta Basin, and I think that it's a good place to raise a family.
So we packed up our 3 kids, and here we came to Uinta County, and what a great place it was.
It's not too big, it's not too small.
And it has a lot to offer that you just don't get in the big city anymore.
Welcome back to the county seat. It's time to discuss what's happening in the real legislative world right now. Joining us for our conversation, Mark Ward, who is the public lands attorney for the Utah Association of Counties, Carrie Gibson, a Weber County Commissioner and the president of the Utah Association of Counties, and Adam Troop, who's the executive director for Utah Association of Counties. We're mid-session right now in the legislative session. It's hump day, I guess, so to speak. How are things shaping up? What are some of the issues that are really deserving of a lot of conversation? I know that, you know, looking at the way we handle crimes and rehabilitation has been a lot of discussion. And would you like to weigh in on that a little bit?
I would. The question about how we stand and where we are is sort of exactly how's the week going to turn out on Wednesday is a question I ask every week. So I think that's sort of where we are. But the reality is that there are some huge issues that we're trying to deal with as a state, and we've got a lot of leadership coming on those issues, and they're carrying those forward, but they're complex. And one of those is the issue of the concept of justice reinvestment, which is dealing differently with how we handle crimes, especially drug offenders, and how we get people to rehabilitation instead of simply getting them to incarceration. It's a massive concept, it's a good concept, but how we actually put it into place and how you write that into law is something that everybody is still working on. So it promises to make a real positive change in how we deal with crime in this state and how we deal with offenders, but there's long ways to go to finish it.
This is one of those issues, though, that where the legislature, as they draft the law, really should be paying attention to the counties, because the counties, with their contracting program, have really kind of pioneered some of this programming, haven't they?
That's absolutely right, and absolutely the Department of Corrections does programming in its prison, does a good job at that. They oversee programming in different parts of the state, both inside the prison, in the counties, and outside in some ways. But that is where the concept is coming from, is how do you get the treatment out into the community? How do you get the rehabilitative services out into the community? And that's really what we're talking about with this discussion. I will say, too, there's been some sense that this is really about how we move the prison, but it absolutely is not about that issue. This is about how we deal with something, a problem for our society that touches our communities, and how we improve on that, how we fix it, instead of simply getting people to warehouse them. And that's a huge change and a huge benefit to all of us.
Is there a little bit of concern about the fiscal side of this? Because as some of the proposal been talked, there could be a huge financial shift from state corrections to the counties. Could there not?
No question. And I think the proof of where we plan to go, I think, is going to be what we come out of this session with and how we move forward on this. The legislative leadership and the appropriations subcommittees today made a commitment to put a very large amount of money into treatment and into supervision type services in our communities to deal with this. They're putting more money into corrections to focus on rehabilitative services. And so as far as we know, this year, it's moving towards the goal of rehabilitation and towards the shared burden of doing that between the state and the counties. We'll hope that it keeps going that direction.
Mark, I wanted to ask you a question on the public land side. There's been some talk about the fact that we've set ourselves up with the transfer of public lands, and it falls on the heels of road litigation. But road litigation on RS 2477 is still a big deal. It's
still a very big deal.
Is there a concern about that moving forward with the state backing?
Actually, the state's been very good on that. The backing is still there for the litigation. There are 22 lawsuits still in litigation. Of course, if the lands transfer, those lawsuits become moot. But until they do, there's every signal we have from the governor and from the AG's office is to press forward with those lawsuits.
Is there some concern? I've heard some mention here that there's some concern about getting the funding to continue the litigation, that it needs to continue.
The prioritization done this week by the Natural Resources Appropriations Subcommittee, they treated that issue very well. They ranked it very high. It's still up to executive appropriations, but so far it looks good.
You know, one of the headlines that's been in the news a lot has been body cameras and police body cams. We had nationally and locally a spate of officer-involved shootings. And so body cam legislation has become a topic around here. You know, it seems simple. What are some of the issues involved with that? Because there seems to be a lot of discussion about it.
There is actually, and it's something that a pretty substantial, big-sized group of people are trying to work through and develop responses to. But I think you're right, it seems simple. Well, let's just give every law enforcement officer a camera to attach to their uniform, and they will record everything they do, and we'll know what's happening. The problems start from even before you get to that point, but they build up in a couple of ways. One is the issue of storage of the information that you have on the camera. How do you keep that? Where do you keep it? How long do you have to maintain it? If nothing happened in an event during a shift, you have to maintain that forever. It becomes a public record if it's created electronically. The other part is if you have a camera on your uniform and something goes wrong with it and it doesn't function through no fault of the officer and some incident's not recorded, does that give people the impression that perhaps, well, you stop your film or you stop recording, or that raises questions about what took place? The concept is good for protecting the public and protecting officers when there are questions, but the how of getting to that is really a lot more complicated than simply saying, let's give everybody a camera. And we didn't even get to cost yet, which is another problem. So.
And you know, I mean, I can see a whole new legal profession of attorneys who are just looking for malfunctioning cameras to create lawsuits.
That's a possibility, but I think just on the day-to-day process of everybody being honestly trying to work towards the best outcome, the concept of filming everything that happens doesn't necessarily correct all the problems and give everybody certainty about what's taking place.
Let's talk about transportation funding. Kerry, this is something that you've been involved in. It's important to Weber County as well as the whole state. You know, talk of gas tax makes people crazy. So what's going on with transportation funding?
Well, it makes all of us crazy because we don't want to have additional tax burden placed on us. But the way that I look at it, transportation has become one of those critical infrastructure issues that is so important, I think, to everything that happens in our economy. If we can't move goods and services, if we are stuck in gridlock, we have a hard time keeping the economy moving. And so it's critical that we have the appropriate resources dedicated towards that goal. Another way to look at it is simply from the investment point of view. If we put the proper investment into a particular priority up front, then usually it pays off in the end. And one of the challenges we have right now is that we haven't necessarily kept up with the requirements, the importance of those transportation needs. And so what we're looking at is a huge unmet liability for the future that we haven't been able to plan for very well. And so we just need to plan well, and that's what we're talking about here. We need to look into the future and say we don't want to find ourselves in a position where we can't keep the economic engine running at full capacity. We got to change the oil. We've got to make sure that the engine is well serviced so that our communities can continue to thrive into the future.
Well, looking at somebody has to look at a county budget. Let me just ask you one simple question to drive home the point. What costs more, replacing a road or maintaining it?
Absolutely replacement. There's no question if we put just pennies on the dollar into maintenance, it pays huge dividends in the long term.
This could be a real problem for counties if we don't get this figured out.
Well, absolutely. Counties have long struggled with having enough transportation dollars to go all the way around the corner, and so we're hoping that there's at least priority put on this issue during this session.
Excellent. Well, we're going to take a break from the county seat. We'll talk about the Utah Association of Counties' perspective on the legislature. We'll continue our conversation after this commercial break.
Planning your next conference or corporate event? The Davis Conference Center offers 70,000 square feet of flexible meeting and exhibit space, plus high-tech audio-visual services that will make your event a success. Whether you're planning a training, meeting, company retreat, wedding, or large convention, let the staff at the Davis Conference Center help you arrange your next event. Located east of I-15 in Layton, call 801-416-8888 or visit davisconferencecenter.com today.
It's one of the most incredible wildlife experiences available, and there is no other place in the state of Utah that offers the chance to see so many snow geese in one place. Come join us in Delta for this year's annual Snow Goose Festival. Bring your camera and be ready to join in the fun. Pick your adventure in Millard County.
You go through the day-to-day repeating what you did yesterday. Don't you wish you could access that piece of your life that's missing? Find the beauty, serenity, family fun, or anything else that's missing from your life in the Cedar City Bryan Head area. Gain access to your adventure, whether it's camping, hiking, the arts, festivals, or just a getaway. Visit cedarcityayl.com for details on all the adventures that you can access in scenic southern Utah.
Color. It's something that can be seen. But have you ever wanted to reach out and touch it? Experience it. In San Juan County, Utah, color comes to life like nowhere else on earth. Color can be more than an abstract. Color can be your gateway to a new world. Visit San Juan County and explore the past, present, and future in a way that you've only dreamed of. San Juan County. Color your experience.
Welcome back to the county seat. We're having a discussion today midway through the legislature. It's halftime right now, so we're taking a halftime break as we're talking about sports in the break. I did want to go on and talk about the county RMP funding. A lot of people will hear this, and if they're even familiar with this program, they'll go, well, the BLM takes care of all these RMPs. Why should counties have to do it too? Mark, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, here's the little secret. It's federal law that says federal resource management plans have to be consistent with state and local resource management plans. And there comes the importance of good state and local plans. County plans, if done right, can be a vehicle to cause federal land management agency to be consistent with and to conform their plans to the policies of county commissioners. And so good planning takes money in this sense that it takes, good plans are based on good science. And good science is not free. And so part of what we're asking with the legislature is for some funding for counties, all 29 of them, to do quality turnkey plans that would serve as a basis, that would give you a scientific basis for sustainable grazing, timber, minerals, watershed use, recreation. All those things can become the template then, so that we can then go to the federal government and say, you have to be consistent with these plans. And heretofore, we haven't had those kinds of good substantive plans that cause the federal agencies to be consistent with us. So that's the vision behind this request for funding, and that too has been treated very well this past week by the Natural Resource Approach Subcommittee. Again, it's up to the executive approach, but we're hopeful.
You know, a lot of people think, well, this is totally a rural issue, but Kerry, even in an urban county like Weber County, good RMPs would be valuable to you, would they not?
Well, as I mentioned with transportation, I think the key to everything we do is good planning. And the last position we want to be in as county officials is being faced with a crisis that nobody foresaw and made proper plans for. And so I think that Mark laid it out very well. We need good science, we need good data, and we all have some skin in the game. Every single one of us, regardless of how much public land is in a particular county. For instance, in Weber County, we don't have a lot of BLM. In fact, just a very, very small amount. I can count on one hand how many acres of BLM we have. But we have a lot of Forest Service land, quite a bit. But the reality is, all of it, we live in a wonderful state. We live in a place where there are assets all around us and some cross-county boundaries. We have to recognize those assets as a community whole, and we have to work together to make sure that those are maintained appropriately. So the public lands issues are very, very important to urban counties, whether we understand it or not, just as urban issues, which get a lot of attention from the general population, are important to the rural counties as well. And so I've always been an advocate of making sure that number one, we look at things from a statewide basis, we look at things as a whole, and try to avoid the temptation to segregate our individual issues and say, this is Weber County's issue, or this is Salt Lake County's issue, or Juab County's issue. Look at them as a whole, and then, as Mark mentioned, plan well for good solutions in those particular cases. And I think this is a great effort on that part. As Mark said, the Natural Resources Appropriations Committee treated that request very well. It'll now go to executive appropriations and then to the full body of the legislature. And my guess is they will understand the importance to all of the counties, even those that are not considered rural counties, as they move forward with this request.
This is actually one of the forte things that UAC is good for, is it not?
Absolutely. We're not the Association of Rural Counties or Urban Counties. We are an association that recognizes that in order to move forward a particular agenda that is important to all of the people in the state, we have to work together. We're that local representation, and it's our responsibility then to take that local voice to state government and make sure that they understand where our citizens are coming from.
Great. We're going to take a break right there. We'll be back with the county seat. We'll continue our conversation in just a minute.
Kanab, base camp for your southern Utah adventures. You belong in Kanab.
What would you do with an extra day in Utah Valley? Explore the Wasatch Mountains? Snap a family photo at Bridal Veil Falls. Cool off on Utah Lake or the Provo River. No matter what you're searching for, you can find it in Utah Valley. Bring everyone together.
There is a place where young and old make connections. Where kids feel like grown-ups. And grown-ups feel like kids. There is a place where beauty arises in contrast. Where wonder is universal. And laughter second nature. There is a place where friends find a future. Families find each other. And feelings find their home. There is a place.
Landscapes as diverse as the people who venture to find them await. All you have to do is find a place to begin. Moab, Utah, in Grand County, where adventure begins.
Welcome back to the county seat. We'll continue our conversation about the UAC important issues, the Utah Association of Counties and the counties of Utah here at the legislative session. One last thing that I thought we should touch on in this session. In the transfer of public land saga, we started with a bill, and then we came up with a commission to look at how we manage the transfer, and then we put in a wilderness bill last year. And it seems like we're duplicating the process of federal management to be prepared to receive these lands. What's up this year?
Probably the last and probably the biggest piece, and that is, okay, if these lands ever transfer, we're talking 30, 35 million acres, how are they going to be managed? Well, right now, BLM and Forest Service have their own organic legislation. Well, what Representative Noel is doing this year is he's got Utah organic legislation, affectionately referred to as mini FLPMA. FLPMA, of course, is the acronym for the Federal Land Policy Management Act. So it's a 50-page bill that will lay out a chassis, if you will, for how to manage those lands, so that if and when we ever get to that point where the lands are transferred, there'll be a chassis ready to receive it.
Well, there is a big misnomer out there and a big misunderstanding because, well, obviously there are advertising campaigns going on right now that said transfer of public lands is transfer to private ownership. But this whole policy, this whole movement has been geared in the fact that we're a public land state and we intend to keep it that way. Is that not the case?
Yes, in fact, what I call the mini FLPMA bill has provisions in it that do not allow sale of property unless approved by 2/3 of the legislature. So, you know, the legislature is putting its money where its mouth. I mean, that's what it takes to amend the Constitution. So it'll be pretty strict guidelines that would prevent the selling off of the lands. Utah has every intention of keeping those public lands public.
What are some of the other things during the year that the organization does?
Sleeping. I like to sleep a lot when it's done, since I'm here 5 days a week, morning, noon, and night. But we've got a number of issues we'll work on, and frankly, a lot of it is just continuing what we did. Even if the state mini FLPMA Act passes, Mark's going to be involved in a lot of discussions about how we move forward, where we go. The commissioners may have some choices on local option sales tax issues to bring forward.
We deal with these policy issues all year long, and we develop them through our policy process and then bring them to the legislature. So, but this is a great deliberative body. It is great to see all these individual representatives and senators representing their constituents all across this state. It really is a pleasure to be a part of as we watch this sausage be made and as we watch government function, and I'm really grateful to live in this great state because of the way that it's managed. It's a great process.
Absolutely.
Well, just as a final note, very quickly, I want to remind you that the county officers make this effort to talk to our state legislature, and they are probably the most accessible elected official you have. So if you want to talk to the legislature and you want some meat behind it, go to your local county commission or council meetings and get involved in the process.
Tuesdays at 10 o'clock.
That's it. There you go. Very good. Remember that local government is where your life happens. You should be involved as part of the solution. Tell your friends about County Seat. Get engaged, get involved, and we'll see you next week. If you like this video, then we invite you to subscribe to our channel, The County Seat. You can do that here. And we invite you to share with your friends. We also invite you to get all the latest up-to-date information by following us on our social media channels. And if all else fails, make sure that you watch The County Seat Sunday morning at 8:30 right here on ABC4 Utah.